Hi, this is Sasha Rose with Venus Wisdom. Welcome to Align with the Star Wisdom of 2022. I'm going to dive right in with a walkthrough of this amazing year, this transformational year that we're in, and how you can work with these energies in the best way possible in order to wake up to your own personal transformation, your sacred purpose, and to have a deeper sense of your own inner knowing and your power. So Venus as the golden key into the Age of Aquarius is the idea of syncing with Venus and working with the Venus cycle as the container for all the other astrology that arises, just as in referencing our own heart wisdom becomes the container for all the other experiences that may arise in life. Keeping that as central is how we stay centered and how we create the kind of timeline that we want to see in the Age of Aquarius. Because the Age of Aquarius isn't guaranteed to be some kind of idyllic version of our society. We're in a very powerful time of choosing. And with every sign, with every situation, there's a positive possibility and there's a negative possibility. And so I love this image because it's got the golden quality that is associated with the sun energy, and the Venus sign here actually looks like a bit of a key, and inside it has the Venus rose, which is the pattern that she makes in the sky from the Earth's perspective, which shows us the natural harmony of the Venusian principle. So a bit about me, I founded Venus Wisdom in 2012, and I consider there to be two parts to this. One is the magic, and that is my own lived experience, having a lifetime affair with the mystery and the mysterious, and considering myself a practical mystic. And then also syncing with Venus for now 9.5 years and really understanding what that means and how to work with that energy and how these patterns repeat in the cycles, and then teaching that to others. And more humans, and mostly women from what I see, are waking up to the power of the Venus cycle. The mechanics I learned from a few different sources as far as how does the cycle work. And so the system I created through Venus Wisdom, it combines the Venus cycle phases as well as the star points. And there's teachers listed here who are teaching on one or the other of those perspectives. Venus Wisdom brings them both together. And just a nod that in here, I am using the term guardian instead of ruler, and that's inspired by Ariel Gutman. Love that Venusian switch of the word in order to connect which planets influence which signs the most. And there isn't currently a book that teaches the Venus Wisdom way of astrology. And so we are the book, we're the living book. And all the women and men who come to the webinars and the women who are in the Venus Wisdom Collective groups, they are each bringing their experience and sharing their inspiration from syncing with Venus. And we're writing the book together. One day, I hope for it to actually be something we can pick up and read. But for now, we're doing the research on the ground. So we're living through the end of the dominator culture, the dominator consciousness that has informed life on this planet since our oldest stories. The Age of Aquarius has this potential to liberate humanity or end our evolutionary arc. And so we're really at this crossroads now, and what we're choosing is critical, these two different timelines, these two different directions. The big question is, will we create a new paradigm based on care and connection for each other and in harmony with the natural world? Or will we allow for a more destructive version of this dominator culture to control us through disconnecting us from our bodies and the natural world, as in everything going virtual? So some good questions to ask right now, which may be difficult questions, but the answers will be important, is how have you devalued your body? We have a whole culture that entrains us and conditions us to devalue our body. How have you outsourced your natural knowing? That's a really important one, especially in the last couple of years, with a lot of external authority telling us what's happening and wanting to take control over the decisions that we make for ourselves. How have you allowed painful experiences to shut down your heart? Well, if Venus is the key here, and Venus is connected to our heart wisdom, when our heart is shut down, then we don't have access to that wisdom. So that's going to be an important piece of this puzzle to look at. How have we been shut down by painful experiences? And how can we open again so that any experience we can meet it with a quality of openness? Are you ready to write a new story from this power over to the power with, and from feeling disempowered to aligning with your own innate power? This is a call for heroines to redream the world through syncing with Venus and through using astrology in this way. You know, not everyone says yes to the journey of the heroine. Not everyone, I believe everyone hears the call, but not everyone says yes. So if you're drawn to this and you're feeling excited to understand how syncing with Venus can awaken you to more of your truth and more of your power, you're in the right place. So a major theme, as you're going to see as we move through this, is working with both the masculine and the feminine. So the primal pair, the feminine is represented by Venus, the masculine by Mars, and they're really mutually arising, interdependent, and they continuously transform one into the other. So this is this beautiful art piece is a human version of the yin yang sign. So one can't exist without the other, and they each contain each other in the essence of the other one. If you saw my presentation on Venus Mars, you'll see how that is true at the level of their cycle and at the level of their sign. I encourage you to watch that if you didn't. Each one of these essences are connected to source, the original energy. And both Venus and Mars have a cycle with the sun. And so they not only meet up with each other, but they also meet up with the life energy itself, source. And so when we heal both of these parts of us to become whole and sovereign, we do that through each having their own connection to source and being able to respond to both our inner signal as well as attune to another being and extend that care to another without sacrificing ourselves. And this is what's referred to as the sacred marriage or the hieros gamos. And when we do this internally, when we embark on this journey within, we can create different kinds of relationships, evolutionary relationships that are dynamic and mutually beneficial and supportive with everyone in our life. So this is what's on the table. We're going to be focusing on Venus as this primary container, and yet Mars is absolutely important as more of the human companion, the way that we relate on the human level with those that we have polarity or attraction or, that kind of dynamic with, as well as the sun as source, which is the way that we plug into our own energy and our own inner knowing, and ultimately our own signal that's going to guide us through these times and be that light that shows us the way and shows us the way that's right for us, which no one else will know but us. We're the ones to light the way and to light the path for ourselves. So this image I created for the calendar. If you have the calendar and the guidebook, you recognize it. There's our Capricorn Venus goat jumping from the old dying paradigm into the new paradigm that is not yet really formed. And she's got the Venus rose on her forehead, and she's really working with the gold energy here to bridge between the two. Gold is associated with the heart, with the sun, with what I call the solar feminine. And so this heroine's journey initiates us deeper into the warmth of our own heart's desires and brings us an ability to follow our own guidance and to bring forth our unique gifts that the world needs right now. So we are living legends. The people of the future are going to look back and ask, what did we do during this great turning? What was our role? How did we show up? How do we participate? And so we are going to really document that as much as we can by rewriting our story, these stories of oppression from this life, from our ancestors, from other lives, from what we've seen on this planet. And the deeper we go into our bodies, the more we trust our bodies, the more we trust our natural knowing, and we move from that place, this is the solar feminine in action. We really take on this role of these living legends. And we may not all write down everything that happens to us, but I highly encourage you to document this journey. And that's another recommendation, to get the guidebook and the calendar, so you have a space to do that, a dedicated space. So here we are, a quick look at the planets. I love the way here the Earth, obviously this is not proportional, but Earth is where we are, and really sandwiched in between Venus, which is going towards source, towards sun, the inner planets, and Mars, which is going out into the unknown, going further out. And this very much illustrates the way these two principles work, with Venus being our attention in and our inward experience, and Mars being our outward experience, and the way that we separate. They symbolize those two energies, masculine and feminine, symbolize those two movements and the way that we put our attention. Venus is our feminine essence, our heart wisdom, and our ability to give and receive love, to bond, to create and live in beauty. And there's this beautiful mirroring that happens between Venus and the Earth. Venus is actually pretty close to the same size as the Earth, even though that's not clear in this particular slide. And it's like the wise friend, that wise sister that's reflecting back to us our own subjective experience. Sometimes we're so in it that we can't see it. So Venus helps us to know ourselves more and become more intimate through those reflections. Now that's Venus as a single point, we might say. The Venus cycle is the 19-month dance that Venus has with the sun, and represents not just our feminine essence, or how our personality might attract and might give and receive affection, but this is really our feminine wisdom. So this is the mysteries of life, death, and resurrection, sun being source and Venus being our ability to connect. So this is our connection with source within, and the solar feminine is leading with that connection, really trusting our heart guidance and moving with that into the world. So we have the two different aspects of Venus. And so the Venus cycle, this 19-month cycle, is that energy of cycling. It's the energy of movement. It's the energy of something unfolding over time, which is different than if we just look at a single point of Venus in our chart. So Venus wisdom has a specific way of looking at the astrology. We've already talked about the golden key, looking at Venus as a reflection of our feminine essence. We've talked about that. And we really use that 19-month container with the sun, that that experience of her cycle as the container for all the other themes that are arising. Because if that is the most important thing, if the most important thing is that we recreate the world so that we can live not just peacefully, but actually awaken to our tremendous potential as humans and our tremendous genius and our tremendous creativity, well, then we need to keep that central. And so we hold that as the most important container for everything else that is arising. And this empowerment and transformation is very important. It's not just about being in our heads and understanding the astrology, it's actually moving with our own transformation. The heroine's journey that begins now, if you're hearing the call, we've just started a new cycle, involves shedding what is no longer true for us in order to discover more of who we actually are, and then bringing that out into the world. And so this is an important and ancient practice of initiation. And we attune to the new and peak Venus portals. And those are particularly powerful times to touch in with our inner knowing. If we can't, catch up with Venus every day, those are the 2 points within the month that we want to be remembering to sync with Venus. And Venus will show us how to anchor the solar feminine frequency, how to create a new reality. And ironically, we start with not knowing. And through that not knowing, we can access a deeper place within ourselves. And the more we're able to hold that not knowing, we can be available for a new solution, a new move, a new expression that perhaps we wouldn't have done if we had defaulted to our conditioning. So as speaking of cycling, a lot of us are familiar with cycling with the moon, orienting to the moon. I did that for a very, very long time. I considered myself a moon worshiper. I would go out on the full moon and bask in the moonlight, and I would sync my cycle to the moon. And so this is a part of the reemergence of the sacred feminine, is this understanding of the moon and how that traces back to the ancient goddess cultures that were really taken over about 5,000 years ago. And this knowing that there was a global reverence for the great mother and the feminine energy that really got taken over violently in many places. It was part of the moon mysteries and is part of the moon mysteries. And the moon cycle, everyone is pretty familiar with at this point. And so we know that that starts with the moon being so close to the sun from the Earth's perspective that we can't see the moon. The moon is essentially between the Earth and the sun. And this is about a 29-day cycle. So that's the new moon, got an extra O in there. And then once the moon is further away from that position, we can see that first quarter happen with the moon starting to fill up. And then of course, at the full moon, there's an opposition, and the moon is fully illuminating the sun's light. And then we have the waning moon happen, and it returns to that spot. So there's these 4 points within the moon cycle that I'm going to use the same map to show you the Venus cycle, because there's really a choice here. This is the lunar feminine. And it's really, when you look up the moon and what it means, it's about conditioning, and it's about our ancestry, it's about our lineage, it's really about our story, the story that holds us. And that is important. It's important to know the stories that hold us in order to rewrite our story. The Venus cycle is quite different. The moon is, of course, constellating around the Earth and tucking us in a sense. It's safety. So whatever has happened to us on one level is safe because it's familiar. And so that familiarity is a quality of the moon and of conditioning and of patterns. We might say, I want to stop doing that. And yet we notice that we're still doing it. There's something about it that's familiar. There's something about it that just clicks in with who we are. And so the moon can fortify those patterns and that story. And so this idea of syncing with Venus instead of orienting with the moon is an alternative for those who feel called to go beyond the moon. We don't need to devalue the moon. We can still appreciate the moon, but perhaps we don't resonate with the moon, or we're curious what would happen if we began to travel all the way around the sun as Venus does, and to bring our consciousness and to bring our feminine wisdom all the way out into that evolutionary space behind the sun. That is the possibility. So this is Venus's map. We switched positions. Now the Earth is up here and the sun is in the middle. And so when the Venus cycle starts in what I call reset phase, it's like that new moon. Venus is in between the Earth and the sun. And then rises as morning star and gets some space from this original position and becomes very high and very bright. She's about here right now, if you go out in the morning and see her. And then once she reaches that highest and brightest, which is out of the gate, she's bold and she's brazen, this new feminine energy, she begins to descend, and she descends all the way through the morning star until she sets as morning star and disappears behind the sun. So this is us following that consciousness all the way around to the secret place behind the sun. And then she rises again as evening star and takes quite a few months to get up to a position here where she's at her highest and brightest as evening star. And then she goes retrograde and starts all over again. So this is a different cycle. It's still a cycle. There's some similarities with the moon. This is 19 months instead of 28 days. And so obviously it's much longer. And so within that month, we work with a different way to mark the month. Instead of the new moon, we work with the new Venus portal, which I'll share more about. So here's a way to think about it. I correlate the 19-month Venus cycle with a book. And it's the story of our next heroine's journey. And when we say yes, we start the journey. So there's the magical book. So when Venus meets the sun, that seed of that story infuses the entire book. You know, it's the seed of the plot. It's the seed of the theme of the book. And so that sign energy, when Venus meets sun, you know, it's the lineage, it's the grandmother energy that remembers all the books in the library going back in time that have that same theme. Now, there's another very important point that you may have noticed in the last Venus map that I showed. So she meets the sun as morning star right before she is visible. She is between the Earth and sun. And then she meets the sun behind the sun, that secret meeting. And so that could be considered part 1 and part 2 of the book. I do consider the entire 19-month cycle to be one book, not 2 books. Some people split them up, but I would say it's a part 1 and a part 2 of the same book. And whatever sign she's in at the beginning of the cycle will infuse the entire cycle. And then that part 2 will add another layer of meaning as we move through part 2 of the book. Now, each Venus portal, new Venus portal, is like a new chapter in the book. And that's the time in the morning sky and in the evening sky when Venus is with the moon. So the moon is included in syncing with Venus. The moon is just not the primary feminine force. So Venus and moon come together and make a portal. Some people call them a gate. And that opens a new chapter for this 19-month book. And then each sign change brings in a new energy that might be considered a new theme in the story, you know, a twist in the story, and moves the story along. And then at the end, we always recap the book. That's the retrograde. And we prepare for the sequel, which will be the next Venus cycle. So all of these books in a library repeat, and there's 5 books in an 8-year period. There's 5 Venus star points that Venus and sun meet within an 8-year period. And so we could consider those, you know, all a set of 5 books that are, one is a sequel to the next. if that helps you to think of it and make sense of it, then I hope it's supportive. If not, you can just think of it in whatever way helps you. So here is a more sophisticated version of the Venus cycle map for this specific Venus cycle, which is Venus in Capricorn cycle, which began on January 8th, 2022, and will go all the way through August 13th of 2023. So this is what we're going to cover in this Align with the Star Wisdom in 2022. We're not going to go into 2023, but we're bridging 2 years within this. And this is what gets really interesting about using the Venus cycle as a container. You begin to notice different happenings because you're using that whole 19 months as the container. So you can see these Moon and Venus meetups are illustrated here with the degree. So if you have the calendar or the guidebook, this is in there along with the degree. And then you can begin to see, you can begin to learn the symbols if you don't know them. That's Capricorn. And you can begin to see in your own chart where these might land in your life. And I did another video on how to pull your chart. If you don't have one, it's a really good idea to have one, and you can paste it right into your guidebook and use that for this amazing cycle that we're embarking on. So this is the same map as the simplified version. It just has all the major points of the Venus cycle numbered, and then all of those Venus, Moon, new Venus portals involved. There they are, Venus Wisdom cycle and, the Venus and Capricorn cycle calendar and guidebook available at venuswisdom.com, or you can now buy them print on demand through Amazon, and you can get the link from that. I'll include it in this video. If you have the guidebook and you don't know astrology, I really want to make this accessible to anyone. It's not just for astrologers. And so you can reference what each planet means and what the signs mean. And you can just go back and look at those. And this is the important piece where you begin to see where your personal chart holds the different signs. And so then, oh, this Venus cycle started in my 8th house. Well, what does that mean? Oh, okay, this is a place of personal transformation and shared resources. Oh, deep intimacy. Okay. Or, oh, the Venus cycle started in my 1st house. This is a place, the 1st house is self-identity. My identity is going to be really affected by this cycle, how I present myself, and so, etc. You can begin to piece together the meaning of how this might land for you in your life. So here are those 5 books that I was referring to. These are the star points. And I've added some of the more recent dates, but we could go back in time for a long time. So here is on this side is Aries, and that starts in 2013, but we could go back. And I will include the link to Ariel Gutman's site in order to look up your star point. If you've been in the Venus, the heroine's experience with Venus Wisdom, all of those resources were given. And that's something that you may want to find out is what is your Venus avatar. And that information will be included if you want to go deeper, because you were born under one of these star points. And so the other piece I would just say here is that these star points change every 100 years. So we could go back, as I said, quite a ways into the past, and we could go forward quite a ways. Well, I'll talk about that in a minute. We have 2 star points that are on the changing and on the verge of changing. The most important thing to know is that this Venus and Gemini cycle is the only cycle in our lifetime where twice we were able to see Venus at that beginning reset time when she's between Earth and Sun, to see her cross the face of the sun. And that is the picture that I show where Venus is that black dot moving across the sun. So that's important because visibility is really powerful. And so Venus only is ever visible in Gemini in our lifetime. And we just had our first Venus in Gemini cycle since the 2012 crossover. The yellow are the Venus retrogrades, which start the cycle, and the white are the times when Venus Sun meet in the underworld, but I don't consider that the beginning of a cycle. I consider that the underworld secret meeting. So we just finished this June 3rd cycle of 2020 that started at 13 degrees Gemini, and then we go this way, just like you do when you make a star. And we are now in the January 8th, 2022 cycle, started at 18 degrees Capricorn. And then if we follow the star, we know the next one is starting, like I said, August 13th, 2023. And then we're going to go back to Aries here, March 22nd, 2025, and finish the star with Scorpio changing to Libra. This is what we'll talk about in a minute. And that's going to happen in the underworld. We'll have our first Libra star point, but then we have another beginning of a cycle in 2026 in Scorpio. So as I said, in this Venus in Capricorn cycle, that's where the cycle started. We have a Venus in Libra star point for the first time in 100 years. Very big deal. The last one is 1771 to 1880, that this star point. Do you notice in the listing how they're moving degree just a little bit? So they're actually moving backward through the zodiac, but you can see those numbers are just a few, every 8 years, they're moving back just a little bit. So you can go back to your journals, your photos, your memory of late 2013, early 2014. That was the last time that Venus was retrograding through Capricorn and started a new cycle in January of 2000. Oh, wait, hang on. Hang on one second. Yeah, 2014, January 11th. I have to find it there. So you may notice some similar themes coming up, especially having to do with issues of Venus, relationships of all kind, self-esteem, values, whatever brings you joy. These are all Venusian themes, and they're really all the good stuff in life, our joy and our connection and how we love and how we feel about ourselves and what we value. So we may notice a similarity there. So as I said, this time the Venus in Libra star point is going to happen in the underworld, which is part 2 of the book, not starting the cycle. And then in October 2030, it will happen again in the underworld, which is it's going to be another Venus in Capricorn cycle in 2030. And then in 2034, the Venus in Libra will start the book. This is really important. It's a huge deal because Venus will be starting a whole Venus cycle in one of her native signs of Libra. So that Venusian energy, that feminine principle, is coming back very strongly. And we can see in the past how women's rights and the feminine principle really came to the fore during these star points that happened. The women's suffrage movement happened, not exactly during. A lot of the fight for that happened during the Venus and Libra star point, and then women got the vote, and there was a delay in it actually landing, but a lot of the energy for it happened within the star point. We could look at other things. So the current star point, if we look at each of these star points as being these active, excuse me, these active, important points in our chart and in our astrology, they're invisible, right? You're not going to find this in your birth chart if you print it out. So you might actually want to go ahead and, if you have your birth chart, if you have it now or make a note for later, to write in 18 degrees Capricorn, to go ahead and just write that in the Capricorn area. So if we look at the guardians, aka rulers, we have Mercury, we have Saturn, we have the Sun, we have Mars, and we have Mars. So there's no Venus in here, right? There's no Venus, there's no moon, there's no feminine representation per se, although we could argue that Capricorn is a feminine sign for sure. So 19 years from now, right now, one of the things we're going to discuss is that the North Node is in Taurus, which is connected to Venus, one of Venus's sign. North Node is our collective evolution, really important point. This is where the eclipses will happen. So I found this really interesting. And if this doesn't make sense, just let it wash over, no worries. But 19 years from now, when the North Node is back in Taurus, it just went into Taurus in January, as you'll see. So in 2041, we have another Venus star point that's going to shift. And this time, instead of shifting from Scorpio to Libra, we're shifting from Aries to Pisces. So both of the Martian star points are shifting in the next couple decades, which is really interesting. Venus is exalted in Pisces. She loves being in Pisces. And so that feminine principle, is really going to be so activated, and it just bodes well for the future and the ability to live in balance in a way that we have no memory of, maybe myths and senses of a certain rightness that we might touch into sometimes, but the world as we know it can seem so disharmonious and so wrong to us when we have that inner sensitivity and sense, we might call Eden or Shambhala, or this memory of a time and a place where there was more coherence and harmony, and there just wasn't all this strife and suffering in the same way. So it bodes well for that. A word about signs, because when we're talking about signs, and we have all the signs in our chart, we just might not have planets there, but these are really different expressions of consciousness. The 12 signs really represent all the different expressions of consciousness that we know of. And so we will be looking at Venus through the signs and really bringing in, almost like characters, bringing in these different energies, Venus being the character, the heroine, and will be inviting us to consider and be open to and receive the different themes of the signs. And is this in the book? This is not in the book, but now you have it. You can take a screenshot. I can send this out with this video, but you can look at the ways that Venus might act, especially around receiving love, expressing, giving and receiving love. And we know if we go to Capricorn that there's this seriousness and deep sensualness connected to nature, connected to the senses, connected to a deep eroticism. And that the Venus in Capricorn's heart blossoms over time, loves commitment, and can come forth. There's a hesitance there in Capricorn, slow moving, and wants to have that container of commitment in order to flower. So you can check in with those for your own Venus and, how you experience the energies as they move through. So speaking of signs, we just moved through Venus and Gemini cycle. So that one sign then becomes this overarching theme that colors and infuses the entire 19-month cycle. For some reason, I think of it as the grandmother, because it's like holding everything in the background. And there was an invitation as the world changed beneath our feet, June 2020, as unbelievable events took place before our very eyes, as all these restrictions came in and were normalized. And there was a lot of unrest and protests and just so many energies changing all at once during that time. The invitation was stay open and curious, and to own that power that we are choosing. That saying that we don't have any control of what anyone else does, but we do have this this choice around what we do and how we act and how we receive our not even how we receive our moment, but what we choose to focus on, we could say. And so we can focus on the heart and allowing our heart's intelligence to be primary. And that was especially important during the, what I don't know if what they'll be known as, but the Facebook wars, the social media wars, of just so much dehumanization of each other for having different opinions, so much censorship for people that don't agree with certain policies or, what the authority is telling us we need to do. So that was Venus and Gemini, and we can really hold that up for ourselves and ask ourselves, how much was I able to stay open? No judgment, but to be honest about that, and to know that see the places where you were invited to do that. And that the more we did that, the more we cultivated this inner coherence in our being, what we were feeling, what we were thinking, we were also able to express that without shutting down others. So it was this tricky, I don't know, tricky. It feels tricky in a way. I mean, Gemini is mutable, so it's multifaceted, but holding many possibilities while attuning to our own truth. So it's more the opposite of Gemini Sagittarius, that is that one right way kind of attitude. And Gemini is this or that. It's like, well, it could be this, both and. And so that we're invited into that more, most especially if we're feeling righteous. That would have been a good time to remember openness and to return to that beginner's mind and beginner's heart, and really consider that, given everything that we don't know, which is more than we know, the universe and life is a wild place, and we're discovering all the time new understanding. But to be in the fluidity of the emergence of new understanding, and to look at how we might have gotten rigid or seen others get rigid. So this might resonate with you as a theme for this last cycle. And really, what did we learn and unlearn about the sacred feminine is another question to ask. And I just loved this quote, and I'll link this podcast, The Emerald, with Joshua Michael Shrieks. He just nailed it. He nailed the idea of the clutter, which to me feels like a lot of the question around what is Venus and Gemini. And remember, Venus and Gemini that we just had in 2020 ripples back to the 2012 and 2004. 2004 is when Facebook was invented. 2012 is when everybody was on it. So, or, all the different social medias. So these digital tools help to perpetuate this clutter. So here's his quote. There's a lot of cultural clutter these days around the goddess. She appears everywhere. Her many names are invoked, free of context, in 100,000 ways. She's what? An empowerment tool, an archetype, a self-help course, a political symbol, something that is invoked to bring more creative energy or material abundance into our lives. Something that is, in an individualistic modern world, always seems to have a whole lot to do with us. Yet the goddess traditionally is much more than this. She is the animating power of the universe itself, felt in bodies, realized in states of deep conjunctive rapture, accessed through ritual protocols, alive in trees and stones and living geography, alive in song, alive in the myths and stories of her, alive in sound, alive in longing, alive in trance, alive in the states of consciousness realized by those who feel her. So that contrast between the clutter and then this animating power of the universe itself, I love that. And when we speak of Venus and the Venus avatar, we're really pointing to that animating power beyond archetype and really our infinite selves that on some level can't be named, can't be seen, and yet we can feel it. So from Gemini to Capricorn, really came this shift from the breath to the bone. And we can see the qualities of Gemini. I'm not going to read all of these, but there is, some of what I spoke to before. And there's something about learning to switch between our feminine and our masculine, our attention in, our attention out. That feels like that was one of the gems of the Venus and Gemini cycle, and an awareness that I cultivated through coming into contact with Kasia Urbaniak's book Unbound, which is just brilliant for both Gemini and for Capricorn. Actually, I feel like that book has so many gems for the learning of these times. So we're moving from this Gemini air masculine changeable into the Capricorn earth feminine initiating elder wisdom. So from the youth to the elder, from the air to the earth, and this embodiment and more of a focus as opposed to scattered energy, and wanting things to be tangible, not conceptual, really a mastery of our inner realm and our ability to connect with our inner guidance, to be that wisdom. Also, with Venus in Capricorn and the Venus cycle being in Capricorn, there's a difference between the sign moving through and then the whole cycle being in a sign. It gives that sign a certain, like I said, like that grandmother power. I don't know, there's probably a better word for it, but that's what comes, so that larger power, that vaster power of the Venus and Capricorn cycle feels like the power of love to move mountains. Venus is love and Capricorn's power. So Kasia writes, power is not something one experiences in isolation. It's not a feeling. You do not sit in a room alone and empower yourself. Power is a function of strong relationships where what you give is valued by the receiver, and what you receive from the people in your life is exactly what you need and want. So this is an alternate to some of the empowerment definitions that we might have, and to understand that this quest to know our own power will always involve other people. And that is Venus. Venus is always relational. So Capricorn loves success. So perhaps this cycle will have success, a new level of success in resurrecting the sacred feminine within our own being. Always been there, never missing, but perhaps disconnected from or forgotten or conditioned out of us through trauma or through lack of nurturing, but always there, this feminine nature in all of us, regardless of sex or gender. So here she's the queen of integrity, and she's really, Venus loves pleasure. So what is Venus in Capricorn? The pleasure of manifesting. Capricorn loves manifesting, making it real. And so how do we deepen into that heart wisdom and have more discernment as we move through this time when this one culture is dying and a new reality is arising, but it's kind of hard to tell what's what. There's so much manipulation. There's so much, misinformation in every direction. Even that word misinformation has been weaponized for people that might have an alternative view. So, it's an interesting time to get more serious about our own signal, our own authority, and to take on this more feminine leadership as we create a new culture of care, wherever we are, in our family, in our business, in our, whatever it is we're doing in our community. But there's a certain maturation here. Just because we happen to be in a female body doesn't mean that we know how to wield power or share power. And so it feels like that's part of the maturation of this cycle, is learning to lead from the inside and from that deep care, but also to have boundaries and to have authority and to actually lead, not to be in that nice girl mode of, I don't know, what do you want to do? People pleaser. But also not to be the independent woman, which is something Kasia talks about in her book that's so resonant. The independent woman is another version of the good girl, another way we're just going it alone and isolating. This could be particularly an issue to be healed during Venus in Capricorn, because Venus Capricorn is definitely like, I'll just do it myself. I'll just do it myself, very self-sufficient. So how do we create that interdependence? And how do we look to nature and how nature operates to understand leadership? It's like nature doesn't sit around and consult with every single animal and plant before it does something. It leads. There's a rising phenomena that happen from the power of nature. And so I think as women, we can tend to hesitate, we can tend to dilute that cardinal, that initiating force. In astrology, that's called cardinal, that leadership moving things forward. And we can have a lot of attention inside ourselves and self-consciousness when we do that. And so it feels like all of that's up to be healed. And sometimes we need to lead. We need to make the move and see what happens to get the feedback about how it went. There's no guarantee here. There's a risk here. So Capricorn is also very much about social responsibility. And so looking around at the next generation, what are they learning, this next generation, especially the younger ones that have been through 2 years of something that for us was unimaginable before this started, the kind of restrictions, the kind of prejudice that people would face, the kind of blocking of our ability to breathe. Many children are having that, happen 6 hours a day. And that's all been normalized for them. What are they learning about what it means to be human? What are they learning about freedom? What are they learning about trusting their own inner guidance in these times? Those are all questions to contemplate and to feel the weight of the responsibility, to allow that to land in your heart in whatever way it does, that we've completely disrupted the human development in the last 2 years globally. And we're already seeing the implications of that. And we will continue to see the implications of that for years to come. I read somewhere, and this is just arising spontaneously, so forgive me for not having the link, perhaps I can find it. But the IQ rates have dropped dramatically in young children because of the coverings, and they can't, have their developmental need to see faces, and to so much cues happen, so much gets laid down in the brain in those early years. So feeling that responsibility, and then what is our piece in shifting from this current reality into a reality that honors our individual unique genius and really cultivates that within us, and that we have those basic needs met, not just basic needs, but the needs are nourished so that we can really thrive and really bring our gifts to this time. Okay, so themes for this time. We're already in it here. We're going to keep going. Resurrection of the sacred feminine principle. Venus is the golden key into the age of Aquarius. The ending of the dominator culture and the liberation of humanity, and redreaming culture based on this reverence for life. So much of the culture we have now is based on violence and really a death culture in so many ways, while ignoring death, but also there's a lot of control and fear around death. How would we recalibrate to be a culture based on reverence for life? We've seen this in history. A lot of indigenous cultures give us hints and clues of what that could look like. Maybe we know that from our own relatives. The masculine principle being reclaimed and being in service to the feminine as a protector, as a protective force, but also a powerful force in its own right that is within each one of us. As well as how that plays out, between men and women. Realignment with nature and regeneration of the earth. We all have known for a long time that we're way out of balance, and we're coming to that pivotal point where it's go time as far as understanding, innovating, and seeing the solutions. And so much of that will happen first locally. So the time of, when we say dominator culture, the time of relying on governments and those people out there with the resources to help, that's really not what this is about. The Age of Aquarius is about radical solutions arising from communities of like-minded beings who are like, oh, we could do this, we could do this. So we're seeing a lot of that happen already locally on the ground. Alternative systems are sprouting up as systems are failing, and we'll likely see a lot more. So how do we align with this star wisdom in these turbulent times? It can be so overwhelming. There's so much astrology. There's so much going on. So the Venus wisdom way, we looked at this Venus star point. We know that that theme, the Capricorn theme, and then the Libra coming in halfway through in October, is going to be like the backbeat, the heartbeat of this whole cycle. And so we can see it. Venus is going to start changing signs and start moving through the signs of the zodiac. But that backbeat of the Capricorn, if you start looking for it, you will see it. You will see it everywhere. You go, oh, that. And then that point of 18 Capricorn for your own personal chart, you can mark that in there. That's an important number this year. And so it's good to just track, at whatever level you can. It doesn't have to be all the astrology. It can just be, one simple aspect, just watching how Venus moves through the different houses in your own chart can give you so much richness and so much meaning. So we don't need to overload. And if you're a more advanced astrologer, you can go for it, and you can definitely go there. So we want to look to the guardian of the sign of Venus, which is at the beginning of the cycle in Capricorn. So that star point in Capricorn, always, like I showed in that model, the retrograde motion happens at the end of one cycle, the beginning of another cycle. So she's in Capricorn for 4 months. So we really get a transmission about what Capricorn is. She's still in Capricorn right now. And she has been since November. So this sign of whatever sign it is that starts the cycle is the bridge between the two cycles. Now, the guardian of Capricorn is Aquarius. And so the guardian of Capricorn is Saturn, and Saturn is in the sign of Aquarius. And so we could say Saturn's the co-pilot of this heroine's journey. The last heroine's journey, it was Mercury. And it was so amazing to see how Mercury's movements added to the meaning of the Venus cycle last time. So this time it'll be Saturn. Saturn's a bit more serious and maybe not as fun, but nevertheless, the co-pilot. So we want to look to Saturn and what's happening with Saturn. So as we start to go through the transits and we, go, oh, this is happening with Saturn, just keeping that in mind. Oh, Saturn is intimately connected with Venus for this cycle. So that thing that's happening with Saturn, it might ripple back to what's happening with Venus. We can look to the Venus cycles, the reset, the morning star, the underworld, the evening star. And we can look to what's happening in those cycles. We know, oh, she's fast, she's slow, she's bright, she's dim, she's visible, she's invisible. And so there might be just periods that are more external, periods that are more internal. We don't really need any astrology for that. If we say, oh, Venus just passed her brightest in the sky, she's reaching towards her highest, you don't need to be an astrologer to make meaning of that and what that might mean in a 19-month cycle. If there's a planet that's shining bright, you're like, oh, okay, this is about visibility and radiance and really, she's getting ready for the heroine's journey. It's like, are you in? She's calling you. Are you being called? That's her brightness. So each of the new Venus portals, as I said, opens the new chapter every month. So we have this way every month to tune in. And then the peak Venus portals are the climax of that energy. So new Venus portal is Venus and Moon together, visible right now in the morning sky. She's in the morning sky. And then peak Venus portals, they're in an opposition. So as Venus rises in the east, the moon is setting, the almost full moon is setting in the west. So they're in an opposition. And in the morning sky, generally, Venus is before the sun before the sun rises, and also before the sun in the zodiac. And the new Venus portals and the peak Venus portals happen before the new moon and the full moon by a couple days. It changes over the cycle. But right now it's about 3 days that we'll have the new Venus portal and then the new moon. So it's really this choice point, and you get to choose, where are you going to anchor your energy? The more attention we put on something, the more important it becomes. And you might want to try it and just see what happens. So there's been incredible events and changes reported by women that started doing this. And as I said, the moon is included in the new Venus portal, so we don't have to feel like we're leaving out any part of us. We don't need to leave out any part of us. We can include all of it. And yet when we lead with the solar feminine, it really feels like we're opening up some new territory. And the more of us that do it, the more powerful that opportunity comes. We also want to be looking, as we're moving through the year, anytime there's a retrograde or something, planet goes direct, that is going to be important. Retrograde is going backwards. That's more of a feminine move. I mean, it's not really going backward, but it appears to be going backwards. So it's like that inner time. So there's a retreating, whereas direct motion is more forward and masculine. So we'll begin to see these masculine and feminine moves in all kinds of ways. And so that ebb and the flow, knowing when to move forward, when to retreat, when we begin to attune to that, then we're aligning with the star wisdom. We're not fighting against it. We also want to look when planets have a sign change. It's a big theme change for the further out planets, and the closer in planets change all the time. Right? The moon changes every 2.5 days. That's one of the reasons I don't orient to the moon. I can't keep up personally. I mean, I could, but I don't choose to. So there's quick changing luminaries like the moon, and then the planets that are further out, when they change, there's a much bigger theme that's going to change in the background. Then we also look to the solar and lunar eclipses as these times of potential tumult and opportunity for transformation. They've always been considered like, I don't know, dangerous, but powerful in ancient cultures. And so the lunar and the solar eclipses, they happen on the north node and the south node of the moon. So even though the moon is constellating around Earth and tucking us in and keeping us safe in some way, there's a way that eclipse energy is this opportunity in the moon department to have incredible change. It almost can feel like fate or destiny, or we're clearing a bunch of karmic, residue or something like that. So they're very powerful times to notice. And I don't know if I would count them as an external or an internal. I tend to go in for eclipses. I'm quite affected by them. It's not considered auspicious to start something new on an eclipse because the energy is so wild and unknown, and can be quite ungrounded. So that's good to know for what you're doing. So whatever your year looks like, whatever you're launching, whatever creative projects you're doing, if you're starting something, if you're needing to come to completion with, some aspect of your life, the aligning with the star wisdom is going to really help you to have the wind at your back, so to speak. So you're not working against the natural flow of energies. So I'm going to pause there, and we will keep going here with more aligning with the star wisdom soon.